Hey everybody, this is Rykard here again, and welcome to another Pokemon X and Y update video. It's been a little while since we've gotten new information on these new games. However, within the last week or so, we were actually given a new Pokemon that will be included in the Pokemon X and Y games when they are released in October. So since this Pokemon, in my opinion, is very unique in its typing and what it could potentially do, I figured it would be a very good idea to just do one video dedicated to this Pokemon. So without any further waiting, let's just jump into the discussion right now. So as far as the information that we know about this Pokemon currently is concerned, we really don't know that much, but the two things that we do know about this Pokemon, in my opinion, give a very good indication as to what this Pokemon could potentially be used for in a competitive environment. So the most important thing about Honedge that you really need to realize is that it does have the Steel Ghost typing, which is a typing that has yet to exist in any Pokemon game, and also a typing that people have been asking for a really long time. At least I know I thought it'd be really cool to see, just because of the ridiculous amount of immunities and resistances that come with this typing. Now we'll talk more about that in the later slide on this video, but just know that the typing that this Pokemon has in itself gives it incredible competitive viability. As far as learnable moves are concerned, we only know that it gets Swords Dance, which obviously makes sense because look at it. But this is huge for any Ghost Pokemon because other than Shedinja, which is obviously incredibly difficult to use in a competitive setting due to the entry hazards and a million things, the fact that it only has 1 HP and all that kind of stuff, Honedge is the only other Ghost type that can learn Swords Dance, which is amazing for this because it has a way of boosting its physical attack to very high levels, since Swords Dance boosts your physical attack by 2 status every time you use it, meaning that Honedge, regardless of what its base stats are, could potentially be a very powerful physical attacker just by using Swords Dance. And another really interesting thing to note about this move is that being a Ghost type, you can sort of assume that Honedge might get access to Shadow Sneak, which means Shadow Sneak in combination with Swords Dance can be incredibly deadly, especially if your opponent doesn't have Pokemon at high health at the point you bring in Honedge into battle, because it will basically be able to clean out a team if it sets up, which is something to think about. Obviously, there are a ton of other Ghost and potentially Steel moves that we don't even know about being introduced in X and Y, so that could even yield more possibilities for what this Pokemon could do in battle from an offensive standpoint. So that is something really cool to kind of think about as you're speculating about what this Pokemon could do. But in my opinion, regardless of what its base stats are, as I've said, we already know that it could potentially be a very powerful physical attacker and also a very, very good defensive Pokemon just because of its typing alone. So as far as this typing is concerned, I made a slide basically to showcase all of the different weaknesses and resistances that this Pokemon has. So starting off on the resistances side, specifically the immunities that this Pokemon gets, I just wanted to talk about the fact that it is immune to 3 types, which are Fighting, Normal, and Poison. Now these 3 types are absolutely amazing for a Pokemon to be immune to, especially with its type combination, because Steel types are normally seen as a very defensive typing because it resists a ton of things, but it is weak to Fighting, Fire, and Ground. However, since this Pokemon is immune to Fighting, that is one huge counter to Steel types that this Pokemon does not have to worry about, and also is able to basically mean that this Pokemon is able to do whatever it needs to from a defensive standpoint without having to worry about one of the most commonly seen types in standard competitive play. And that is huge, in my opinion. Its normal immunity is also very nice to know about, but it's not nearly as big of a deal as the Fighting one, but it is important to make note of just because you can bring this Pokemon in on normal type moves without having to worry about it taking damage. But the last immunity that it gets, being Poison, is another extremely huge thing to make note of because of the fact that this Pokemon cannot be toxic. And if this Pokemon is any sort of defensive type of Pokemon, not being able to be toxic is absolutely huge. That means it will be able to basically last an incredibly long time in battle. It obviously can be burned, paralyzed, frozen, and put to sleep and all of that, but not being able to be worn down by toxic over the course of battle is an amazing thing just for this Pokemon to have. Also to make note of, from a defensive standpoint, before I get into any more of the resistances, is that being a Ghost type, this Pokemon will probably be able to learn Will-O-Wisp. So it will be able to cripple physical attackers while also having all these ridiculous resistances and immunities. But to talk a little bit more about some of the resistances, bug types will only be able to do a quarter of the damage they will be able to do because of the fact that steel types and ghost types resist bug moves. It is also resisting dragon, which is huge, ice, flying, grass, psychic, rock, and steel. And those are a ton of different types that you see all over the place. Also, I don't really know what the offensive typing of fairy does, but because steel resists a ton of things, I'm assuming that steel will also resist fairy. However, I have no idea if this is true or not, which is why I put the question marks around fairy when I wrote it there. I have no idea if this is true or not. I'm obviously making this video in July. The games come out in October, so for those of you that may see this in the future, I have no idea at this point. But as for the weaknesses, this Pokemon only has 2, with all of these ridiculous resistances, which are fire and ground. Now, the crazy thing about this is that being a ghost type, this Pokemon has the potential to have Levitate as its ability. Now, I don't think this will happen, but if it does have Levitate, that gives it another immunity, obviously with the exception of Mold Breaker being taken into account, but this also means that it would only be weak to one type, which would be fire. Now, as I said, I don't think this will happen, but it would be crazy if it did. Also, being a steel type, it might have the potential to have heat proof as its ability, meaning that its weakness to fire will no longer matter. So those are 2 potential abilities that this Pokemon could get. We don't know what it gets yet, but it's just a speculation thing that would be insane for this Pokemon, because it would make it so that it would basically be one of the best defensive typings in the game with the ability taken into account. Now, that is absolutely amazing from a defensive standpoint, and also just because of the fact that this Pokemon looks so freaking cool, I'm sure a ton of people are going to use it anyway. Imagine a, enchanted sword that was possessed. That's crazy. If there was any way they could do a steel ghost type, this would be it, in my opinion. But as far as your thoughts are concerned, let me know what you think of this Pokemon in the comments. Let me know what you obviously thought of my review of this Pokemon, of what we currently know, because I'm always looking for ways to kind of give you more of what you would like to see in videos like this. So as always, take care, goodbye, I will see you all next time, and leave a comment telling me what you think about Honedge.